We are just starting. We are on 2022B. Huh?
E1. We just learned about King Yehoshua.
22B1. Okay, let's begin. So, Chav Bet Amud Bet, 22B1, and we had started learning a little bit about this king, Yoshiyahu. And we're in the Pisukim, which describe the conversation that was taking place between himself and Paro Neche. Okay, so let's carry on. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav. You know what? Let's go back one bit. Let's start from Ki Havenayich. Can you guys see Ki Havenayich Nafsha? You guys see that?
No, where's it?
Okay, so the Gemara is here.
Going on the previous page?
No. Shalom. Okay, it's right basically across from the word Keren Afel. You see that? In Tosafot. Mm-hmm. So that those words just go into the Gemara. Ki havenaycha nafshe. Okay, you got it? When he was dying.
Yeah. Yodea is the first word on the line.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm sorry. That's skipping ahead. Let's go back. We'll start with Maya Elokim Asher Imi. Okay, a little bit further back. Maya Elokim Asher Imi. You see that?
Yeah. How many rows up?
It's 4 lines down from the top. Okay, so let's just give the backdrop. Paro Neche was not at war with the Jewish people. He was just traveling through Israel to get to his war and then to get back to his country.
Was he an Egyptian pharaoh?
He was an Egyptian pharaoh. Okay, they were a very powerful nation, and they had no qualms. They were not picking a fight with the Jews. He says to King Yoshiyahu, "I'm going to travel through your land as a shortcut." Yoshiyahu says, "No, I don't let you travel through my land." Paro is like, "Are you sure you really want to go to war over this? I'm not taking my soldiers all the way around. We'll go to war if you tell me I can't go through. I have no reason to go to war with you." Yoshiyahu decides to put his foot down. Paro goes to war with him, and in that battle, Yoshiyahu dies. Okay, Yoshiyahu is a tremendous tzaddik. He's the one that brings Am Yisrael to Teshuvah after the reign of his father, of Menashe, when they were all turned into Ovdei Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara says, why did Yoshiyahu do that? So the Gemara starts with, "My Elohim asher imi." Paro said to Yoshiyahu, he's like, "Don't get in my way. My God has told me that I should go do this war. Don't get in my way." "My Elohim asher imi." The Gemara says, "Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, Zu Avodah Zarah." It refers to his Avodah Zarah. Amar, Yoshiyahu said to himself, "Ho'il v'kabatach ba'avodah zarah." Since he's relying on Avodah Zarah, Yachil nale, I'm gonna overpower him. He's not going to be able to instill his will upon me.
I don't understand.
Which bit don't you understand?
Something about Avodah Zarah. What does that have to do with?
So Paro, in telling him to let him through, says, "Don't get in the way of me and my God, Yani." So Yoshiyahu is like, "Oh, you're relying on your Avodah Zarah God? So of course I'm going to be able to outdo you because your God is nothing."
But is he testing God?
It seems silly
Because he has no qualms with him.
not because he has no qualms with him, but because he's not Jewish. So what's the difference if you have a new God? Doesn't concern us.
The point is not that
God.
the point is not that you're going to get punished for it. The point is that you're relying on Avodah Zarah. You're not going to get help from it.
Yeah, but what's his business?
It's not his business. He's just saying you're not coming through my land. You're not marching through. You're not trampling everything. You're not. So we'll see in a minute. The Gemara is going to say why Yoshiyahu felt so strongly about whether or not they would walk through his land. Okay? The Gemara says, Vayoru hayorim lamelech Yoshiyahu, the archers in this battle shot at Yoshiyahu. V'yom hamelech lavadav, and the king said to his servants, Ha'aviruni kechleti me'od, because I'm take me away from the battlefield, because I'm very, very sick. In other words, he realized he was going to die. Okay? Kechleti me'od. My kechleti me'od. What does it mean that he was so wounded, so sick? Amarav Yehuda says, Melamed shasu kol gufo kikavra. There were so many arrows. I believe the number they give is 300 arrows that pierced his body. His body became like a human sieve. That's what they say, kikavra. Amar Rav Shmuel. Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yohanan, why was Yoshiyahu punished? That he should be murdered, that he should be killed in this war. Because to make a decision like that, he should have went to ask the Navi. The Navi is the emissary of God. You think you're the king, you know what you're doing, you're going to make your own decisions. You should have asked Yirmiyahu. V'lo nimlach, and he didn't ask. My darash, what did he learn that made him make this decision, which had such a catastrophic consequence? My darash. The pasuk says, "V'cherev," when the Jewish people are doing the will of God, "V'cherev lo ta'avor ba'atzechem," a sword shall not travel through your land. My cherev, what is this sword that's not going to travel through your land? Ile ma cherev she'ena shel shalom, if it's a non-peacetime sword, in other words, someone who's coming to fight with you at war. V'haktiv, the pasuk already says, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz," I'm going to put peace in the land of Israel. So if in the same pasuk it says, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz," there's going to be peace in the land of Israel. And then it says, "V'cherev lo ta'avor ba'atzechem," and a sword shall not travel through your land. Obviously, if you're going to be at peace, there's not going to be any wartime swords traveling through your land. Must be that what the pasuk was telling you is that not only will no one come to war against you when you're listening to the word of God, but no army will even take and carry swords through your land when they're at peace with you. Now, let's be honest. Sure it does. It says it by omission. I did not need to say, "V'cherev lo ta'avor ba'atzechem," a sword shall not pass through the land of Israel. Right? I didn't need to say it because I already said, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz." There'll be peace in the land. Since it already said, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz," to then say a sword won't come through the land indicates, on top of my blessing of shalom, there'll be no swords traveling through your land. V'cherev lo ta'avor. If anything, by the way, the word lo ta'avor supports what he's saying. Won't pass through your land. So Yoshiyahu read the pasuk, and by the way, he read the pasuk correctly. It's not like he made a mistake here. What's the problem with his dirasha? Ela filu shel shalom. Hu eno yodea, but he did not know she'en doro dome yafeh, that his people were not good enough to be able to have merited this level of blessing. So it's true that this is a level of blessing when the Jewish people are all doing the will of God. But the people, to Yoshiyahu's eyes, were already on the level where they deserve the beracha, but in truth, in the privacy of their own homes, in the privacy of their own hearts, they were not on that level yet. So therefore, he should not have picked this fight with Paro over the blessing that only would come true if the Jewish people were on that high level.
So had he consulted with the high priest, he would have been raised.
And if he would have asked the Navi, because how is Yoshiyahu meant to know what's going on in your heart? How's he supposed to know that? How can he know what's going on in your house? The answer is, he can't. Who would know that? A prophet. If he asked Yirmiyahu would have set him straight and said, look, the people are great, they're doing great, but they're not there yet. And therefore, he would not have made that mistake. And he was actually punished for it. Now, I want to add one more piece to this, because I think this is very important. You know when they say context is king? Context is king. What kind of punishment? Such a punishment. The guy's a tzaddik. He brings the whole Jewish people back into Teshuvah. Because he doesn't ask the Navi on a dirasha, by the way, that he's right about. Because an error in judgment on the level of the people that he could not have known, he gets punished, he gets with death. It doesn't make sense. So let's see for 1 second, and I'm going to explain the context in just a minute. Ki avenaycha nafshe, when he was passing away, Hazai Yirmiyahu noticed, the prophet noticed, Sifvate de kamerachshan. He noticed that he was mumbling, his lips were moving. Amar, he said to himself, oh no, Shema has v'shalom milta de lo mehagne amar. Agav tza'areh. Maybe now, because of the pain he's in before he's dying, the guy is literally a human sieve, okay? Maybe because it's his last few moments on earth in pain, he's saying words that should not be said. Yirmiyahu was worried.
In giving birth.
Exactly. So we were worried, Yirmiyahu was worried that all of Yoshiyahu's good deeds could be undone in the final moments of his life in pain, saying how he rejects God, or you see how God is unfair. Like, he was nervous, so he wanted to maybe try and comfort him and guide him in these last difficult few moments of his life. Gachin, he leaned over, Vishame'eh, and he heard the words that the dying King Yoshiyahu was whispering. The kamatzdik aleha dina anafshe. He was justifying, he was accepting the judgment, the deen of Shamayim on himself. Amar, tzaddik hu amonai, God is righteous, kifihu mariti, and I have rebelled against his words. And that's why this is happening to me now. In fact, by the way, in the Echa, when Yirmiyahu is talking about the destruction of Yerushalayim, he uses these words, tzaddik hu amonai kifihu mariti. He uses the words that Yoshiyahu said on his deathbed, accepting on himself the judgment that had come his way. Patach alea usha'ata. In that moment, Yirmiyahu said about him, Ruach apenu, also a pasuk in Echa, Ruach apenu, Mashiach Amonai. The breath of our nose, Mashiach Hashem, the anointed of God. According to some opinions, what Yoshiyahu was saying was, or what Yirmiyahu was saying is, that had he not made this mistake, he could have been not just the Mashiach Hashem in terms, the anointed king of the Jewish people, i.e. because the kings were anointed before they became king, so he was the anointed of God, but rather the more classical usage of the word Mashiach Hashem, which means he could have been the actual Messiah because of the way of what he did for the Jewish people, okay? Ma'aseh, the Gemara says, there was a story, oh sorry, I said I was going to give you the context. So how could it be that as someone who could have been the Mashiach, well, because he didn't ask the Navi, he thought he knew the right thing, he made a mistake, he did the derasha that he said was right, he just miscalculated exactly where they were. For that alone, he deserves to pass away, to be killed in such a terrible way. The important thing here is context. You see, Menashe, his father, had led the Jewish people astray to a point where almost the entire Jewish people had started worshiping Avodah Zarah because of Menashe, okay? We would find in the history of the Jewish people instances like that. Yeravam ben Nevat also, who literally stops the Jews physically from going up to the temple. He places idols at all of the forks in the road that lead you to Jerusalem. He places korbanot there, or altars there, mizbechot. He sees the Jews going to the Beit HaMikdash with their korbanot. He says, don't go there. Here, sacrifice here to this golden calf. Okay? So he literally forcibly turned the Jewish people to idol worship. The saving grace of the king is that the king realizes that there's a Navi who carries the word of God, and the Navi is meant to tell him what to do. When a king decides what he wants to do for himself, that is a toxic situation that even with the best of intentions cannot be allowed to survive.
That's why there are no the family of the Maccabim.
The Maccabees that were Kohanim.
Because they took both roles to themselves.
Exactly. The family of the Maccabees that were Kohanim that became the kings in the Hasmonean dynasty. At that point, the entire family was wiped out. Why? Because they merged the two concepts of nivuah, of what's it called, and king. And suddenly, as time went on, when one being is holding both of those, the liability of becoming corrupted is too high. So there had to be a drastic punishment for this because of the context that Yoshiyahu, you're the king, you're the son of the king Menashe. It can't be that you're going to fall into that trap again, and therefore that's where we go. Sorry, the Gemara then continues. There was a story. They went down to their city, and the Gemara actually continues and tells us what happened in that story. What happened with these cases of institution of fasts? Ibailahu, where they noticed that there was a wind blast, or there was fat or yellowing of the grain or something that was going to indicate there was going to be a problem of the crops drying out. Ibailu, the Gemara asks a question: Kimelot tanur tivua or dilma kimelot tanur pat. The Mishnah told us that you institute a fast when there's a measurement of rain of grain that's been damaged by these wind blasts, by these hot air kind of things, shidafon coming, the shrav coming through. Okay, so it says kimelot tanur, like the filling of a tanur. The Gemara says, okay, well, what does that mean? Does it mean a kimelot tanur de tivua, like a oven full of grain? Or does it mean like an oven full of bread? Because when you bake bread, there's space in the middle. You're baking the bread only on the sides. When you fill an oven with grain, the whole middle is filled. So it's a much higher level, a much larger amount of grain that would need to be ruined if kimelot tanur, like an oven full, is an oven full of actual grain, or do we mean an oven full of bread, which is far less grain that needs to be damaged in order to institute the fast? The Gemara says, okay, Tashima, come in here, let's see if we have a proof. Kemelo pitanur, like the filling of the opening of the oven, the mouth of the oven. Ve'adayin tibayeleu. Now the Gemara says, okay, so what does that mean? What does that tell me? Like the mouth of the oven. You can't have just the mouth of the oven when it comes to grain, correct? Because if you're trying to measure the space of the opening, that could only be covered by or measured by an object which is contiguous, like dough. If you tried to just put grains in the opening of the oven, they would just fall through, okay, or they would fall down. So the only way to measure that, the measurement of the opening of the oven, is with dough. So you see that the measurement was a measurement of dough, not a measurement of grain, okay? Gemara then continues, and the Gemara says, "Ve'adayin tibayelu," and even after we said that this is what it means, that the measurement is a measurement of dough, tibayelu, we should ask, kikisuya de tanura, do we mean, when we say like the opening to the mouth of the oven, do we mean kikisuya de tanura, the amount of dough that it just takes to cover that opening? Or do we mean, or dilma, kidara de rifta, de hada lelepuma, that if you put the bread on the wall of the oven and then you measured from the bottom of the oven to the top, to the mouth of the oven, so the measurement is the mouth of the oven, how much dough would be in that straight line strip from the bottom to the top? How much dough is there? However much dough that would be the shiur. So is it the front or the space of the inside measurement? Answers the Gemara, teku. Teku means we don't know. Interesting, that word now has become part of classical parlance. In Israel, when a sports team, it's 1-1 in a soccer game, you know what they call that? Teku. Fascinating how this word from the Gemara is now used in sports. Teku means we don't have an answer, like we don't have a resolution. But the actual teku was an amalgam of 4 words: Tishbi, Yiyashev, Kushiyot, Ube'ayot. Who's Tishbi? Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi. That means that in the Eliyahu, Tishbi, Yiyashev will answer Kushiyot, questions, Ube'ayot, and queries. Okay? What does that mean? That there are some answers that we won't know until the coming of the Mashiach. So Eliyahu is going to have a long list of things to answer, when the time comes. We're going to come to Eliyahu, we're going to say, what's going on with quarterite stone in the oven, what's going to happen with, am I allowed to, what's with certain things are not a question, like the Pesach list. It's not a question, we don't need to ask him. That's obvious. Certain other things that we're unsure about. Nargila Grill. I think also Manalapan is quite settled that it's tarif. Okay, all right, yeah. And like I said earlier, we can't mention any other restaurants because the ones that we mentioned all went non-kosher. So we're 2 for 2 in ruining restaurants. We're forbidding speaking about any good restaurants. On the other hand, if there's any restaurants that you want closed, you could let us know and we'll talk about them. And then they'll become, okay, fine. Ve'od gazeru. So we don't know the answer to this. Teku. Now let me ask you a question. So now that we don't know the answer, so what do we do? That's a Ray Cheer question. I mean, I don't know. What do you mean I don't know until Mashiach comes? What do I do now? It's a good question, right? The answer is, since there's a teku, there's a question, any rabbi could, in the absence of a resolution, could say, I want to institute a fast because there's this amount, the lower amount of bread, of grain that was ruined in a shirav, or some other rabbi could say, no, I don't want to institute that because we've not yet reached the higher level. They're able to use either side because teku, there isn't a resolution to this question. V'od gazeru. They also made a gezerah. Taanit al she'achelu ze'evim. There were wolves that ate 2 children in a certain area near the Yarden. Amar Ula. Ula said, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotadak. In the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotadak. Ma'aseh, bala'u ze'evim shtei tinokot. There were these wolves and they devoured, they literally swallowed 2 babies.
It's like your London story from last week.
Right, for the foxes. V'heki'um derech betarek rei. And after they swallowed these babies, okay, it came out, the waste product came out, and the children that they'd eaten that died, they came out, unfortunately, the other side. Ubama aseh lefnei chachamim, the situation came in front of the chachamim, v'tiharu et habasar v'tim'u et ha'atzamot. This is a fascinating halachic aside. The skin of the baby, anything that came out, unfortunately, that would have been gone through the digestive tract, okay, had been the stomach acids. They work on flesh. That's what they do, and they break it down. So that was already considered. It wasn't tameh. Normally, if a dead body is tameh, the rabbis ruled that unfortunately, when there's something that operates on the dead body, and it's no longer a dead body, this is something that was eaten. This is the waste product of the animal because it had eaten away unfortunately. But the bones themselves, which don't get processed from such a situation, those bones are still tameh, and they needed to be treated as such. So what's the nafkamina? What's the difference? Imagine, unfortunately, let's say, God forbid, these children belonged, to a Kohen family. Would the Kohanim of that family be allowed, not the immediate relatives, would they be allowed to go to the procession, take these children, and bury them in the cemetery? Would they be allowed to do that or not?
Because of the bones, no.
If we had ruled that the bones will also, this is no longer a dead body, a child, this is unfortunately, it's so hard to talk about this, but this is already a product that has been, like, I'll give you an example. There are many opinions that say that if bar minan, a body is cremated, and all you have is the ash, there are many opinions that say that ash is not tameh. There's nothing there anymore. Okay? Because there's no bones. Even though this is the remains of that person, but they are no longer in the state that they were in when they were there previously as a dead body. So therefore, they've lost the process of tumah. Okay? So here the Gemara is sharing that in that instance, that was the ruling specifically that they had given, that tiharu et habasar v'tim'u et ha'atzamot.
I'm trying to understand, how does the first story connect to this story?
No, this is, the Mishnah then continued and talked about that there is another case where we would institute a Taanit. And where did we institute a Taanit? Where something outlandish happens with a wild animal attack. So wolves came and they ate 2 children. That's not a normal thing to happen. So they instituted a Taanit. The Gemara is just saying, you should just know that in that actual story, the end of that story, there was a halachic question that was raised. And I'm just going to let you know what the halakha was that they instituted. Because this halakha actually has major ramifications. Major ramifications. What happens in certain situations where the body undergoes some form of change? Or the example I just gave you. If there's ashes, I'll give you a crazier example. If there's ashes and they're not tameh, because they no longer are, tameh means impure.
Okay, so when does something become pure versus impure? And what is this?
If a dead body is impure, right? That's why Kohen like Harry can't go to the Bet HaKavarot. He can't go to the cemetery.
Okay.
Bar Minan, unless it's one of the 7 close relatives, a Kohen's not allowed to become tameh.
Okay.
Okay, why? Because a dead body is tameh, is impure. A Jewish dead body is impure.
Okay.
The Gemara says, what happens if that dead body underwent some sort of physical change? So it's no longer a dead body, it's now some other thing. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara says, the flesh, unfortunately, had become something else. Mm-hmm. But the bones had not been processed. They didn't change. So the bones were still tameh. Why are we bringing this up? Why is it relevant? The answer is because there are halachic ramifications of this bit of knowledge that we were just given. And one example of that would be like in a situation of cremation, which is unfortunately more and more and more relevance, prevalent in reform and conservative communities. That why should we bury? It's cheaper, it's easier, it's faster, it's cleaner, etc., etc. Burial is very expensive. Cremation is much cheaper. There are cases where people have agreed to get a kivurat Yisrael, a Jewish burial, because we're willing to tell them we'll pay for it. Psycho, okay? Now, my friends, listen to this, because I think this is the same way I just told you that in a scenario of cremation, the body, it's not tameh, right? If there's if there's no pieces of bones there left, it's all been turned to ash. That is what we learned from this Gemara, that if you've transformed it, it's no longer the same thing. So even though a dead body is tameh, this is not a dead body. This is ashes, okay? Not only is it relevant with regards to the Kohen being able to be present or bury it, it also means that the halacha of burial no longer applies. Meaning, let's say someone cremates somebody and then says, oh, you know what?
Should have started when they died and not when they were buried?
Sorry?
You're saying when you talk about burial, counting from burial, you would start the shiva from when they died and not from the cremation?
No, you would start the burial from the time of the...
No, you start the shiva
from the time
from
of...
the cremation?
I would imagine so.
Okay.
Not that there's a halachic reality to cremation, but at that point they have shifted from a body that has not yet been buried to a body that no longer needs to be buried.
To shiva.
Yes. Okay.
Is
Yeah.
there any significance with like soul or this or that?
Absolutely. I mean, the Gemara talks about the incredible pain on a spiritual level that the soul feels with the destruction of the body. People, if only they understood the suffering that they were putting their parent through.
If they cremated.
But the cremation. They think, the person's dead, but we believe in his soul. And the crazy thing is, many Jews that are distant from Judaism also believe in a soul. And the thing they don't understand is if you believe that this person's still there, then there's probably ramifications for how you treat the body after they're there. And it's a very, very emotionally charged situation. Okay.
Does that have anything to do with then Yirmiyahu being, Yeshayahu being, created like a seed then? His body isn't just like a normal body anymore, it's undergone some kind of process?
No.
Okay.
No, because it's been pierced many times, but the body is still, everything is exactly the same, okay? In fact, unfortunately, again, it's a horrible thing to think about, but there's an organization called Zaka in Israel.
Oh man, they do.
Incredible work. But one of the things that they do is when they have these explosions and the person's blown to pieces, not only do they bury and get the body that's been blown apart, but they search the site to find a finger, a piece of flesh, even blood. They mop up the blood with like towels or sheets, and they bury the blood together with the body. There's two reasons for that. Number one reason is that all of this is part of the body. It needs to be buried. It needs to be respected. Second reason is, which is a wild reason. We know that you bury a body, a Jewish body, you bury it in tachrichim, in shrouds, right? You don't bury a body in the clothes, right? What do we do? But there's also tachrichim, there's shrouds, okay?
There's something wrapped around the body first, and then you go with
A burial shroud, a plain clothing burial shroud, okay? So there's you don't bury someone in their clothes, never, except if the person was murdered. If the person is murdered, you bury them in their clothes, even with the shoes they're wearing.
Wow.
Why? The Gemara says, in order to arouse the heavenly wrath. When the guy turns up in Shamayim, in his clothes, it creates a maelstrom. It creates a tornado in heaven. Well, what happened? Who did this to you? So in order that there should be retribution and justice carried out in this world, we, so to speak, send them to Shamayim like that. So that's also a part of why they do the burial in that way, to ensure that Borei Olam takes care of the people that did these heinous crimes.
Is there a third reason that if you didn't clean up even the smallest pieces and Kohanim were walking on the street, that there would be a problem?
Yes, but that wouldn't explain blood.
Okay.
There's a minimal amount of a bone that would be the case for a Kohen. So the bone would be yes, but it would not be necessarily for blood. Blood would not make Kohen tameh per se after it dried. Okay, let's let's continue. Al elu matri'im b'Shabbat. For these, we declare fasts and blowing of the shofar on Shabbat. Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught, a city that was surrounded by goyim, in other words, in war, or nahar, or if a river came surrounding a city, because the water was rising, they're all going to be drowned. Exactly. Or a boat that is being tossed on the ocean, it's ready to fall apart, ready to be sunk. Or a scenario where an individual, you have Gentiles chasing after him, they're trying to kill him because he's Jewish. Or because they're trying to steal something from him. And unfortunately, oftentimes, there are many muggings that are gone wrong. They try to take something from you, the guy, puts up a fight, and they kill him for his money. Or if a person is seized by a ruach ra, an evil spirit. So this idea doesn't just mean some sort of demonic or shed-like, possession of the goof. It means also when a person has or experiences some form of a spirit that comes over him where he goes crazy. So unfortunately, that we've seen that in severe mental cases where a person is so deluded by their psychosis that they're imagining that they're in another place or they're another person, they're running away, they're constantly afraid, there's someone fighting with them. I always refer back to that case, that video. You want to see the power of the human mind. I mean, it's very tragic, but there's a boxer who got hit in the head, and you see he's trying to punch. He knocks the other guy down, and then he's trying to punch this invisible boxer who he thinks is still fighting with him. It's wild because of the brain injury he got. It was a short time after that he actually died from that brain injury. But the point is, you see how the brain is capable of completely altering a person's reality. Okay? So that's also called ruach ra'ah. An evil spirit comes over the person where he's now in a situation where he's a danger to himself. Okay? He's running around, he's jumping off the roof, he's committing suicide, he's trying to, fight with people who are not trying to fight with him. So in extreme cases of this, that's called ruach ra'ah. Al kulan, on all of these, yachid rashai l'sagef et atzmo. A person, individual is allowed l'sagef et atzmo, which means to put himself through b'ta'anit, to almost torture himself with a ta'anit, with a fast, because of the fact that this extreme scenario happened to him. Rabbi Yosef taught, "En yachid rashai l'sagef et atzmo b'ta'anit." He's not allowed. A yachid, an individual person, for these things is not allowed to institute his own ta'anit because he feels like, I really should fast because of this. This is a real crazy thing happened to me. I'm going to fast and do teshuvah. Teshuvah you could do, but you can't fast. You're not allowed to fast. So, machloket between the Tanakama, the first Tana in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yossi, who says that you're not allowed to take it on yourself. Why would Rabbi Yossi say, the other guy didn't say you have to, he just said you're allowed to. Why would Rabbi Yossi disagree? What am I doing wrong if I fast and I didn't have to? The Gemara answers, Shema yitzarech labiriyot. Because you know what? If you're weak, in a weakened state because of your fasting, and then you can't do your job, you can't make a parnasah, and then you're going to collect money from people because you're fasting and you're in a difficult spot, and people are not going to have pity on you because you know what they'll tell you? You didn't have to do this. You did this. You decided to do this yourself. So you know what? Stop fasting, and then you'll be okay. So we're worried about the damage a person's going to do to themselves, which will not be assisted by the people of the community helping him with his parnasah in his weakened state, because they'll say that you did this to yourself. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi said, you're not allowed to do this to yourself, to weaken yourself through voluntary fasting for extreme events. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Yehuda said the name of Rav. My tamad Rabbi Yossi. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi? Tichtiv, the pasuk says in Bereshit v'yadam lenefesh chaya, and God made man, and man was lenefesh chaya, to a living soul. Now the Gemara is playing on this word chaya. Neshama shenatati bicha hecheya. The soul that I put inside of you, hecheya, keep it alive. So when the pasuk says, and man was a soul that was alive, the Gemara is saying as a dirasha, God says, and man should be a living soul. Make sure your soul, your body stays alive. I've always wondered on this. Why do we bring this pasuk, the pasuk of Neshama Shenatati B'cha Hachayeh? There's a pasuk, an explicit pasuk in the Torah, which says V'nishmartem me'od nafshotechem. You have to guard exceedingly your souls, which means that a person is not allowed to do anything that's unhealthy. If this is something that we're considering unhealthy, either because you're not going to be able to sustain the ravages of consistent fasts on yourself, or because you're then not going to be supported by the community and a person could starve to death, right? In either scenario, that should fit into the pasuk, which is the classic example of where we draw the idea that a person is not allowed to engage in behavior that's not healthy. So I don't know yet the answer to that question. If I come up with an answer, I will share it with you.
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting is not enough, right? So that's okay. Shimon and it's healthier. Shimon Atimani. Let's just finish the last piece. Shimon from Timnah used to say, Amar af al hadavar, af al hadever. Even on a plague, a person institutes a fast b'Shabbat. Ibayilhu, the Gemara asks, Lo hodu lo chachamim b'Shabbat. The chachamim did not agree with Shimon Hatimani. They did not agree with him about instituting a fast even on Shabbat for plague, for pestilence, for a pandemic, for etc., etc. It says the Chachamim did not agree with him on Shabbat. Or aval b'chol hodu lo. But did they agree on chol? So when it says that the Chachamim did not agree with the statement of Shimon HaTimni. Now I just want to show you the Mishnah because it's important to understand how the Gemara is structuring. First, it's Hava Amina, its initial thought, and then it's Maskana. So let's turn back to the Mishnah for 1 second. The Mishnah is way back on Daf Chaf, I believe. And we had that long Mishnah. Where's the Mishnah?
Is it 92 Ted Amud Aleph?
Yeah, 19. So it's
1984.
it's towards the end of the Mishnah.
19A4.
19A4.
No, that's
No,
already.
19B, isn't it?
No, I'm sorry, it's on Yud.
1983, I think it is.
Have you found it?
19 Choni?
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, right before. Al Elu Mitrarim B'Shabbat. That one?
Where is it in the Gemara? In the Mishnah?
1982.
19.
I think it's Good Ted Amud Aleph in the middle. Or towards the bottom.
You see Shimon HaTimani?
Is it 19A? Yeah, that's the long Mishnah. Starts on 18B and then 19A.
Right. So I'm asking, do you see Shimon HaTimani though? Where's Shimon HaTimani?
I see Choni. I see Shimon ben
Is it
Seta.
Shimon ben Shetach?
Shimon de Temani, 1982 on the English, one paragraph down.
1982.
I don't know, I can only see it in the English, right over here.
Yeah, 1982 at the top.
Here we go. 19A in the middle. It's like smack in the middle of the Gemara of Daf Yutet. Like literally right in the middle. Shimon HaTimani Omer, Af al Hadever, V'lo hodu lo chachamim. So let's go back for 3 lines. Al elu matri'im b'Shabbat. On these you institute fast on Shabbat. Al ishi kifu anochrim. Al nahar o al sfina mitarefet bayam. Rabbi Yossi Omer le'ezer v'lo tzaka. Shimon HaTimani Omer af al hadever, also on pestilence. Now you'd assume that he's going back on the Gemara that said that for these you institute a fast even on Shabbat. Not the Gemara said lo hudu lo chachamim. The chachamim did not agree with him. So the Gemara over here is saying is we have no proof what the chachamim were arguing with him on. Shimon HaTimani was clearly saying that you institute a fast for pestilence, for dever, even on Shabbat. Come the chachamim, they say that we don't agree with you. So when did they not agree with him? Did they not agree with him on Shabbat? Lo hodu lo, says the Gemara. This that they didn't argue with him, that they didn't agree with him. Lo hodu lo b'Shabbat, aval b'chol hodu lo, but during the week. So on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they did agree that you would say that you would fast for dever if there's a plague, or dilma, or maybe lo hodu lo kelal. They didn't agree with him at all. Tashma, the Gemara says, the Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Matrina ala dever b'Shabbat. We fast for a plague on Shabbat. Ve'en tzarich lomar b'chol. And you don't even have to tell me that we do it during the week. If you even do it, kal vachomer, you do it on Shabbat. If you do it on Shabbat, you do it on the week. Rav Hanan ben Pitom, Rabbi Hanan, the son of Pitom, Talmidosh Rabbi Akiva, student of Rabbi Akiva, said, Mishum Rabbi Akiva, the name Rabbi Akiva, Omer, En matrina la davar kol ikar. You don't fast and institute fasting and blowing the shofar and all those prayers. You don't do that even during the week. So kelal at all. So the question is, why is it that Rabbi Akiva felt that you would not do it at all, bichlal, even on such a thing? Now, what's interesting to note is actually that the Mishnah already said that we do institute it for Dever. So we have a Mishnah that says clearly that you do fast and matrin for a plague earlier in the Mishnah.
Is this only relevant if there's the Beit HaMikdash? Or no?
Well, technically, this is where we were just now. You have a plague.
Right.
It's all around the world.
Like there's very few things that you could associate modern day with Gemara times.
Well, we've had a whole bunch. Like, did the Jews in the Ukraine fast when there was war surrounding their cities? There are many instances of this.
Sure.
So the answer is yes and no. Technically, yes. Technically, you could have this fast. You could institute it. The question is if people would listen, because now you have one rabbi saying this one. When you had a bad deen, so you came out and you said it, and that was the obligation. But technically, yes, the rabbis would be able to, if they got together and said that we're instituting a fast for the community, they could do that. Right? There are times, as an example, if a Sefer Torah falls on the floor, so the rabbi says that the whole community is going to fast, and the whole community has to fast. They don't have to fast for a month.
Mondays and Thursdays for a month.
No.
Ashkenazi.
We don't hold that. We don't. Hold that. Maybe Ashkenazi. I'm not sure. It's because Ashkenaz food. You're not missing out that much. Okay, hold on a second. So what you just said, by the way, is actually the answer. See, Nathan's on the ball. When did we say that we institute a fasting for Dever? On Mondays and Thursdays. That, the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, and everybody agrees, that for Dever, for a plague, you can institute fasting on Monday and Thursday.
And then the shofar too?
With everything that we talked about. What Rabbi Akiva and Shimon HaTimani, or the Chachamim, who are the opinion of Rabbi Akiva here, and Shimon HaTimani are saying is, Shimon HaTimani was saying non-stop during the week. So all throughout the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like you're fasting the whole day, you're breaking your fast at night.
Ramadan.
Like exactly, Ramadan style, all right? So he was saying that you would fast that way during the week and even on Shabbat. The Chachamim said no. Now we were unsure. They're arguing during the week or they're arguing on Shabbat. The Gemara then proves that they argued on Shabbat that you don't do it, and also during the week. What about before where everyone agreed that you have it? You have a fasting for Dever. On that, the answer is they only agreed on Mondays and Thursdays. Exactly. Not every day. And I always wondered if maybe the reason why, because if you think about it, it's a little bit of a strange thing. We're fasting for all these different calamities, and we're fasting, if there's a problem with the grain, why would you not fast if people are dying from scurvy or from, the bubonic plague? I think part of the reason might be similar to what Rabbi Yosef just said. Rabbi Yosef said that if a single person, a yachid, is having some sort of problem, he can't just decide he's going to fast. Why? What are we worried about? He'll become weak. He won't be able to work and provide food for himself, and no one's going to take care of him, and that's going to be dangerous for him. And he needs to worry about his health. Perhaps the Chachamim were worried that if there's a dever about, if there's a plague about, instituting a fast so people are in a weakened state of every single day might actually cause, they might succumb to the plague. So I'm always wondering, maybe that's the reasoning of the Chachamim, similar to the reasoning we just had with Rabbi Yossi, who said the Yachid. Now, I don't have a proof for this. I have to see if I can find a source for this, but I think that's probably the underlying reason. All right.
In 67 or in
Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen v'amen.